Welcome to Weekends with Amit, and I am Krishanu, your host. Welcome everyone again. But before we proceed to today's subject, let me ask you a question. How many of you have experienced events of coincidence or synchronicity in your life? If you are really truthful, I am sure 100% would have experienced it at some point or the other. Now, if we look at this synchronicity, which is not really same as coincidence, but it can be looked at various ways. What does synchronicity means? That two events which has some impact on one another, but not really causally related. And if we look at from, let's say, a fiction point of view, like an Ian Fleming of famous James Bond, he would say if something happens once, it's happenstance. Twice is coincidence, and thrice is enemy action. That's one view. And the extreme other view, a very serious view, Carl Jung, who says that synchronicities are ways through which people receive communication from deeper things, deeper consciousness levels. So there are wide ways of interpreting this. Today, we are going to take up the subject of quantum science of synchronicity. Now, where does quantum science fits into these events? Let's know from the experts. Please help me welcome Professor Amit Goswami and Dr. Valentina Onisar.
Hi, Krishanu. Hi, everyone.
Hello, I hope you are doing well. Oh, you are looking great. Both of you. Well, today's subject is quantum science of synchronicity. And I don't know whether it is okay to use synchronicity and coincidences interchangeably. They may not be, but what would be your take and how quantum science plays a role in synchronistic events? Over to you, Professor Goswami.
Hello, everyone. Well, I first heard of the word synchronicity, but this was back in the 70s, from a psychologist who was very cautious in defining things. And she defined it as meaningful coincidence. And she even threw in another word for extreme caution, which is acausal. Just like Krishna did, again with very much of caution, that no, there is no relationship of cause. Carl Jung did not make such a value judgment. In fact, towards the later part of life, he even was apt to theorize that there is a consciousness. He didn't use that word, but implied that there is a consciousness, that there has to be there a common consciousness from which the two experiences come from. But one thing he was sure, that one experience is a physical experience, for which normally we say that we don't have any authority over. I mean, people do claim miracle, and miracle is a very divisive, controversial subject. But apart from miracles, I myself don't believe much in miracles. There really is no possibility of interfering in the physical world, in the sense of movement of stars, planets, whether a glass will fall to the floor when dropped. This kind of thing we cannot influence. But the message of synchronicity, as Carl Jung saw it, is clear. There will be a physical event. One of the events will be a physical event. But in response to it, this is the part where things become interesting. In response to it, in somebody's mind, there will be a profound mental thought and or feeling. That's the thing, that there is a physical, and then corresponding to that, there is a subtle response. Is it coincidence that the subtle response came because there is no relationship with the obvious causal relationship with the physical event that took place. So that's what puzzles us. We can say causal, that's one way of saying there are things that happen in the world for which we cannot assign any cause, but that's sort of begging the issue. Because ever since philosophers formulated causality, that every effect must be preceded by a cause, this fundamental doctrine we don't want to violate. All science is based on that. Things happen and we say that there must be a cause. We look for the cause and that gives us scientific insights and new laws. Very important not to violate that rule. So this acausality as an escape hatch, it is still used sometimes, but should not be used. And then what is it? Well, Carl Jung himself, as I said, started believing that there must be a common cause. And that common cause in quantum physics we finally identify as consciousness itself. Because in quantum physics, objects are possibilities for consciousness to choose from. So in quantum physics, the explanation is very simple. The explanation is that there is a physical possibility and there is a mental vital possibility. And consciousness chooses those possibilities simultaneously. Although here simultaneously does not necessarily mean that the times would have to be exactly the same moment. But causally related. This is the idea. Now, of course, one question still remains. Why these two objects particularly? So there is something that might be causing consciousness to cause this thing. That's the further conclusion that we can reach. In other words, synchronicities occur in our life when we kind of ask for them, although we may not be consciously asking for them. For example, in quantum physics, we talk about creativity a lot because physics of possibility. That's what quantum physics says. New possibilities are as much likely to occur if we can choose them. Okay? So obviously, creativity is very important. Creativity is always about new possibilities, new meaning, that we are suddenly collapsing from that cloud of possibilities that is in the domain of potentiality. But we get stuck. I have literally, every now and then I get stuck. And you know what? In those moments, these synchronous events just routinely take place. If we want to be unblocked. And who doesn't want to be unblocked? There are actually people who escape. For them, synchronicity would not be the case. But people who are actively doing the exploration, they're always open. They become very sensitive to the environment. So in this becoming sensitive, what happens is really a bit strange. What happens is that you start noticing things which gives you ideas. Could be coincidence. Materialists could not be explicitly wrong in that. But could also be a meaningful coincidence, like Carl Jung was defining it, given by a common cause. In other words, consciousness produces these events, but then we have to cooperate for the choice of the internal event. The external event, we don't have any choice. That's consciousness. But we are co-creator of the internal world, at least, and there we play a role in choosing by being actively interested in creativity to come in our life. And creativity is anytime you are exploring an archetype. So most synchronicity one notices, most noticeable synchronicity is this event of falling in love at first sight. I never had that experience of falling in love at first sight, but even in second sight, even in third sight, even in fourth sight, it's always a surprise. Always a surprise. And something like the first girl I ever fell in love with, we were going on a train in a group, and she was standing by the door, which we kept open, and the train took a turn, and all of a sudden, sunshine fell on her hair. And at that moment, she turned about, and we had eye contact, and she absolutely looked so beautiful. At that moment, a person I did not pay any prior attention to, at least not much attention, I just thought, this is the woman for me. Very strange. And that often happens to people. And there are many other examples, of course, in my actual search for research ideas. This is a very complex issue. How much literature can you read? And if you read too much, how do you do original thinking? So it's a very difficult struggle that every researcher goes through. My favorite method, and I still apply it. I used to go to bookstores, just sit there for hours to check out various books. But I often use this simple trick because I didn't have really that much time all the time to sit in a bookstore. And bookstore people don't like it, don't like their whatever little chairs they put to be occupied by the same person. They want new people to come in so that their possibility of selling goes up. That's understandable. But I had a very simple method. So I would go, I will make a simple intention that let me find something, and then I'll pick up the first book that attracts my attention. And lo and behold, that would stimulate me enough to simulate an idea. Very interesting. Synchronicity, possible, may not be. The most famous example Carl Jung gave himself. This example is that a woman she was helping with was very disturbed at once, but also she came to the therapist but was not really engaging with the therapist. And Carl Jung thought, how do I get through this non-engagement? Often people who come to therapy, they are sufferers of trauma. So what happens in trauma is that people make an interior castle, and they have the key from the inside to open that castle door. Therapists can only in vain shout, holler, whatever, entice her to open that door, but if she doesn't open, there's no way. So one day, Carl Jung's method of therapy often involved dreams. So she was talking about her dream, and she said, well, she saw a scarab. Scarab has two meanings. One is that they're little creatures called scarab. There's also, of course, the jewelry, that scarab. Now, she saw what she saw in the dream, of course, is jewelry, right? But at that moment, Jung and she both saw actual scarab, this physical worm that was outside the window trying to get in. And Jung caught that scarab in his hand and opened his hands like this and said, there's your scarab. And his doing that broke that interior castle door, broke that down for the woman, and since then there was no problem in the therapist and the client to interact to produce the healing. So this is spectacular, but similar spectacular things happen all the time. A woman was struggling with forgiveness. You know how forgiveness is. Valentina can give you hours of lecture on the subject of forgiveness. She's very good at helping to rid people of this kind of grudge that we maintain. So this woman had a lot of grudges against a person. Usually they're ex relationships, and we just cannot forgive them because they produce so much unhappiness, etc., etc., etc. And then this woman went to a session from this writer who was writing this book where I got this story. And the writer was doing an exercise, how to forgive, just like Valentina does often in her workshops, how to forgive. So she did that, and she somehow managed to forgive, really had a quantum leap of forgiveness. Her heart opened towards that person. And guess what? Same day when she went home, she received a letter. This is this olden days, not email, a letter. So letter must have been mailed sometime before, but it exactly has that person's letter, which is the same idea. Thank you for forgiving me, something like that. How does that happen? Often I have noticed that you think of a person and you need, and a telephone comes or a WhatsApp message today. How does that happen? So quantum physics is explanation. Part of it is consciousness chooses, but part of it also is that non-locality is involved. Non-locality is involved. Something physical is taking place, and for that to have a mental meaning, a non-local connection to receptivity to the world, a connectivity to the world. Now, this is not to just a person. That connectivity also is very important, love, etc. And synchronicity, strictly speaking, can involve a person as well, like the second story I told. But it also can happen with purely material objects. And there, we do not usually correlate with material objects very easily. So, but we can be open to the universe. This openness to connectivity to the universe is very important in our life. I'll tell you the openness story, another story of synchronicity. Einstein, 5-year-old child, has a bit of fever, was at the hospital. So his father, to cheer him up, brought him a compass. And 5-year-old Einstein is looking at this needle for no reason that he could figure out, was always pointing to that north direction. However he turned it, the needle always pointing north. So Einstein had the synchronistic thought. The universe was reaching out to him. See, he's a child. He doesn't know how compass works, that the response is only to the Earth's magnetic field. He doesn't know such thing. But he saw it as an invisible hand of the universe reaching out to him, the little boy. And that connected him to the universe. He never lost that connectivity. And that connectivity is what makes you fundamentally creative. For me, that connectivity was not there when maybe it was there in my childhood. That's another story. But it came back again when I was adult, when I started studying quantum physics and finally understood it. It gave me that connectivity. That connectivity is an example of quantum non-locality. Consciousness is non-local, does not depend on signals. Does not depend on signals. In the ancient Indian psychology and Indian poetry, this is the communication through Akasha, outside of space and time. Akasha. How does that happen? Quantum physics explains. If two objects are correlated, then consciousness makes them one, and they can communicate through this akasha, non-locality, outside of space and time. Can we have a friendship with the universe in this way, that we are open to messages of the universe? Yes, we can. The experience of all creative people are suggesting that yes, we can. And this connectivity is the basis for living happily, living with fulfillment, living with creativity, with meaning and purpose. Okay, Valentina?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. And to just add to your story about Carl Jung, I don't know if you know the symbol of this scarab, what he found, what he saw, what Carl Jung saw, was actually in the ancient Egypt, that of the renewal, the rebirth. So it was a lot of symbology there. Now, just let me start with a joke. So if three people tell you that you're drunk, you better go to bed. There's this saying, because again, indeed, synchronicities are really talking to us, So if you consider synchronicity to be just a coincidence, it means that you didn't really much study what many experts are expressing. Of course, Carl Jung, who came with this term in 1920, and he was describing that this is about an alignment between universal forces and the experience of one person. And also, of course, Einstein, who was stating something like synchronicity is the way through which God manifests and remains anonymous. So again, as Amit mentioned, and as I think everybody here knows, quantum aficionados, it's about a lot of creativity. And in creativity and in science of manifestation, we start with being inspired, and sometimes we feel inspired. And when we feel inspired and we live in the state of inspiration for long, there are a lot of zones of synchronicity coming with the state of harmony, a state of really alignment of your soul. And there are a lot of significant coincidences. And sometimes you're not inspired, it's like you're turbulent and troubled. And in this moment of synchronicity, everything is fluid, people, gestures, objects, they appear exactly at the right time and place. So it's really a way of living. It's my favorite way of living. And this harmony that seems to come from beyond, can even appear like a miracle, even in the very small things, So again, you call them maybe coincidences, sometimes miracles, but actually they illustrate very deep resonances with the mysterious forces of God. You can call them archetypes, if you know about this. And of course, it's just our ego and the mind actually, which is stopping us from being in this state of synchronicity all the time. And I would say it's also a state of flow there that can really manifest. So it's also coincidences, if you want to call them like that are not related with each other by an evident cause. Yeah. And you can say that an event is synchronous with another one when an inner experience, for example, a dream, is preparing us for an event that takes place later in the external world. I had really, really a lot, hundreds of such things when I was looking forward to go to sleep and just wake up and continue, get that inspiration that I wanted, and then find it in the external world. For instance, the intellect has actually very little to do with brilliant discoveries. Yeah, rather, again, it's about intuition that can appear, and the solution, that insight, that we call it insight, is coming without knowing how. As Albert Einstein also confessed. So this term, synchronicity, if you want the translation, it's syn means with, and chronos means time. So this term was chosen by Jung to stand for that simultaneous appearance of connection between elements through meaning, but without a unique or evident cause. And of course, it's nothing that the science, the usual material science, will understand this phenomena or the mind. And then we just call it, it's a mystery there. It can be timeless or, something like that. And of course, in some cases, when certain external events appear, there can be also a lot of symbols around that. And if you think of prediction, for example, prediction techniques, they are based on synchronicity. And as Amit gave this example with opening a book, for me also, there is also something which is called I Ching. It's a tradition which, if you work with creativity, and again, you have a certain intent very clear in your mind, then again, so many things around you can really give you various meanings that you are looking for. So again, when you work with predictions, there's no apparent connection between the signs and their meaning. So all this divination also, it's a form of synchronicity. But again, it's about a connection between the material world to the psychic world through symbols that are not always understood and which appear from the collective unconscious, if you want, I think. So also when a person is quite elevated and wise, then you will have on top of that a special degree of freedom, and you will not feel so conditioned to live by the usual patterns. Yeah. So if you want, there's even like a law of synchronicity, which is offering you then a certain power and power of creativity also. And you feel that anything is possible. So of course, not everything is permitted, but you have this feeling that you can really do everything when you're in this kind of flow. And also just try to see how you feel when you are next to a spiritual master, for example. You may find a lot of synchronicities when you are living together with an elevated person, for example. So there are all kind of simple experience like that, experiments that can teach you and help us, guide us on our trip. It's giving you a sign that you're on the right path. Yeah, it's really helping us transform, actually. And it gives you a sign, yes, you're doing well. So that's my experience. I may give you a few examples. So one was that, I am working with Amit and teaching and writing books and so on for 7 years or so. And just before that, I was in India, and I found my leaf, so there's called Nadi reading. And in that leaf, again, with people that I never met and they never knew, not even my name, there were so many things, which, of course, I was really putting questions to the universe, very deep questions. I was in a deep search for many, many years, yeah, and very, very intense search. And I was really used to live in this kind of flow and really looking for signs and synchronicities. And actually, when they were not manifesting in my life, what I was doing, I was just fasting for 1 day, for 3 days, for 7 days, and even more, or just really putting myself in a state of meditation, because I knew that if I put myself together, all this flow will again reawaken and the path will clear up, So again, I was in this kind of deep questioning. And then again, it was so amazing. What I got from those people was something which, of course, stayed with me. Initially, it felt like, oh my God, it cannot be. But then what's happening right now, it is really all that they were saying, It's amazing. And then another thing is that when I met Amit, this is just last year's moment, after we decided to work together, which was just immediately after we met, when I went to USA, and I saw that even on his car, there was this, it was written, the dealer was Romania. I'm originally from Romania. So it was a dealer Romania on his car. And even the numbers which were there on the car plate, it was so interesting. At that date, my age and his age, it was exactly, his age was completely double. It was just that year. So it was so interesting on that plate. It was really, really interesting. We are just really smiling and seeing that synchronicity. And there were many other things. Like, for example, when I was a student, and one of my best friends, we were staying together, we were living together in the same apartment. And it was so interesting that we were shopping the same thing. So we were not thinking of each other. So it was such a correlation. It was so interesting and so shocking and so giving such a peace in the heart and such a recognition and this smile that was very clear that it's such a wonderful connection and that we were on our path of growth together. So for me, when I think of synchronicity, it's really, I'm thinking of discontinuity, I'm thinking of non-locality, I'm thinking of tangled hierarchy. So actually it's a practice, and not a practice, it's not something that you're doing, it's something which comes to show you the success on the path of creativity, I think. Of course, there are many, many levels. Yeah, but again, it's by far not just a coincidence. To me, these moments of synchronicity, most of them are a sign of divine grace. And it's like a spiritual hand, if you want, instrumented, from the higher levels, um, meant to wake us up, and to even enlighten us towards the mysteries of growth, towards the mysteries of fulfillment. So it's various examples, alive examples of the manifestation of archetypes, even God's manifestation. So again, it's think of all these mysteries of consciousness, yeah, and also the mysteries of creativity, and especially this continuity, I would say. Yeah, there are, I mean, the fact is that there are all these moments when we really feel God's presence, and each leaf, each blade of grass is really carrying the divine print of God. But still, because the way we live nowadays, we are so agitated, and we lost the connection even with the earth, which was enriching the life of our elders in the past. So helping us in this way to be in contact with the divine. So we live, of course, trapped in buildings, and in the pollution, and hardly we can even see the stars, and less and less perceive the divine. So the thing is that I think this is something which everybody should ask, so should check how do you perceive? Are there synchronicities in your life? Are you following them? What is the meaning of these synchronicities? And if it's not there, maybe you may pass through a period of what is called desert, but still we are here to be co-creators, right? So this is part of our path. Amit? Hello?
Yeah, so before we move to Amit, maybe if I put in a word, because I was thinking, if we pause here, people who did not hear these things before, who had no idea of these things before, who took synchronicities as just coincidence. So if we pause here and look back at our journey so far, then we may be able to point out these synchronicities and what they're going to tell us. These connections that we are talking about, that the messages that we receive, that whether we are moving in the right direction, whether we are with the right people, whether we are in the right job, all these things can be interpreted from synchronicities if we look at them and if we assign meaning to them. So, my last, because we are strapped for time, quickly over to Professor Goswami, that these synchronistic events meanings, is there a process through which people can easily spot them? Because sometimes we can just blink and miss.
So obviously, the answer to that you yourself gave. Meaning is the crucial issue. Are we looking for meaning of our life? I'll tell you the story of the physicist who was instrumental in Jung's discovery of concept of synchronicity. This guy, name was Wolfgang Pauli, Nobel laureate, well known for his acute uh, logical facility. At 21, he completely understood Einstein's general theory of relativity, once touted as only 12 people in the world can understand it. It was so complex mathematically. And Pauli understood it, not only understood it, wrote a book on it. It's an extremely sharp logician. Everybody's scared of him and his intellectual acuity. But of course, if you are very intellectual, something that happens to you, which is that gradually you tend to become an intellectual person. The difference is that before you used intellectuality to solve problems, but you had the solutions intuited. But after you become an intellectual, you no longer look for intuition or creativity for solving your problem. You're so intellectual now that you think that you can solve all the problems by your rational mind. So it happened to Pauli. And when that happened, people become detached from consciousness, from creativity, from intuition, and life becomes kind of hard, very non-emotional, dry up. In India, we call it lacking rasa, juice of life. So what to do? So Paulo is at a loss. He knows that he is not happy. So one day he dreams, and this dream is amazing dream. Synchronicity. He dreams of a Chinese goddess, Kung Yen, goddess of compassion. Tells him what? He didn't know. So he went to Carl Jung to find the meaning of what is this dream telling me. And Carl Jung, of course, interpreted it correctly, telling you to make room for emotions in your life, goddess of compassion. And so that also contributed to Carl Jung's thinking, because Pauli must have brought him quantum physics insights about possibilities, non-locality. And so mutually they helped out each other in finding the proper direction of their lives. Synchronicity. Wonderful coincidence that connects us to the universe. Please think about it and use it in your life. The rules are very simple. Just develop a sensitivity to the world. Like that little boy Einstein, I always think of it. There's a similar story of Rabindranath Tagore where he saw raindrops falling on water. Just that simple thing. Falling on water, falling on a leaf, and the leaf started to tremble. And immediately he also saw the same connection to the universe. Rainwater falling on a leaf, making it tremble. That was his first poem. And he became one of the greatest poets of the world. Einstein, one of the greatest scientists of the world. So this should inspire all of us to look for such events of synchronicity and see if that develops into our own greatness. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On a lighter note, those of you who are watching this broadcast, and some of you are watching this repeatedly for a long period of time, there could be an event of synchronicity here, because we happen to be in the process of recruiting students for our masters and PhDs and even certificate programs. So if you want to really understand what's going on, go deep and figure out not only just the event of synchronicity, but the worldview at large, then you are most welcome to drop us an email at info@amitgoswami.org, and we will respond to you. You can also visit we have two websites, by the way, amitgoswami.org and cqaedu.com. And in cqaedu.com, you also get to have a page where there are practitioners, consultants who can help you in hours of need. Do check them out and keep watching this channel. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Goswami and Dr. Onisar. Have a wonderful day.